All right. Cold one, check. Popcorn, check. Let's see what kind of trouble I can get into on YouTube tonight. Ooh, new Dana Hall video. I love her stuff. All right, painting some Necrons up. She does great work with colors. Wait, but what is she? What is she doing? No, couldn't be.
You were the chosen one!
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a long-awaited episode of CT40K, where I have over 25 years of visual arts experience, so you don't have to. And dramatic introductions aside, I have noticed there's an epidemic going around the miniature painting community. From the aforementioned Dana Hall to Eons of Battle, Ninjon, the likes of Midwinter Minis, and Tabletop Time. People are busting out their airbrushes, spraying it over a little thing, and calling it OSL. And I'm here to tell you, overspraying is not OSL. One more time, overspraying is not OSL. But, despite these trying times, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. See what I did there? For those who don't know, OSL, or Object Source Lighting, is the practice of simulating or making an illusion of a light source on your miniature. And for the purposes of this video, we'll be looking at recess lighting, which is where the most flagrant abuses of this overspray practice come into play. Now, all of these content creators are wonderful creators and categorically better miniature painters than me. I have no illusions about that. But the great thing about being a human being is no one knows every single thing, and there's always room for improvement. To figure out what exactly is going on here and why it doesn't quite work, we're gonna do a little bit of an art project. But before we talk about art, we're gonna have to talk about science. Now, as you can see here on the screen, this is a photo of a light in my apartment. It is recessed. What is a recessed light? Well, it's where the source of the light is enclosed by something else, and not everything is visible. The profile of a recessed light generally looks something like this, with our light source here and some sort of enclosing area around it. Now, you might be looking at this picture and you might notice something a little bit weird. Toasty, there's not a weird glow all around this light. And you'd be correct. There are some small lens artifacts there, but that is from the camera lens and not from the actual light source itself. So, what is happening? You'll notice that the parts nearest the light source around it are actually the darkest. Well, the very simple reason for that is light does not curve. It does not curve outside and hit the spots alongside of it. In the profile view, we do not get light that looks like this. Photons, unless they're in very specific circumstances, move in a straight line. Generally, they're going to go out. Same as happening here. But they also move in straight lines at angles too, which means that the biggest angle you can get from this light source is going to look something like this and something like this. And you'll notice on the inside here, I'll use a different color. On the inside here, there's actually no photons reaching this area. So what does that mean? It means that there shouldn't be any spray of that simulated light source in those areas. And you will see that light does bounce. It'll bounce off the inside at various angles. It'll even bounce off the outside. And yes, it might even come back and hit this spot. However, in the scale of miniature painting, and in 99% of circumstances, that bounce light is generally considered to be negligible in its effect in lighting up a miniature model. with the exception of these areas here. So, long story short, you have a recessed light. Where is the light going to be coming from? Well, it's going to be these two side spots where we're getting some actual concentrated bounce light and the light source itself. That's the physics of the situation. That's just how light behaves in the real world. So how can we create a more effective OSL effect in our miniatures? Well, let's take a look at some real world examples. Now here is Dana Howell's lovely painted Necron Lord guy. I don't know Necrons. And we're gonna focus not on the weapon, because that's not actually a recessed light, so it behaves a little bit differently, as you may be able to work out from our previous example. So we're just gonna hide that. We're just gonna hide that portion of the model for now, so we can focus on the recessed lighting, which is largely in the chest and head. So you can see there's a decent amount of overspray here, and she does go over hitting that with her airbrush. But how can we make this a little bit more effective? By coming in and adding a little bit more contrast around these areas. Simply by removing the overspray here, it doesn't actually decrease the value of the glow. In fact, what it's doing is it's adding more contrast to these areas and actually enhancing it in many different lighting conditions. Now, you might be saying to yourself, hey Toasty, it didn't look that bad before. What's going on? Why do we need to do this? And you're right, it doesn't look that bad in these lighting conditions, but those are not often the conditions we find ourselves in when we're playing this game. We're gonna be in an area with fluorescent lights on a tabletop, and there's gonna be a lot of stuff kind of just going on around. There's gonna be a lot of ambient light and strong ones. So your carefully crafted oversprayed OSL is not going to have the same effect as it is in your carefully crafted light space. Now, one thing you will notice, we're already getting a lot more contrast here, and it's helping these glow colors pop. And that's because Dana did a really smart thing. She started off by priming these areas with a really thick coat of white to make those colors pop, and used fluorescent paint, which is chemically formulated to just be more bright, more saturated than a typical acrylic. And it really aids in making those colors look like they're producing light themselves. So she has this great foundation, and it's just this small little error of overspraying onto the body itself where light wouldn't actually be reaching. Now you'll notice I'm actually keeping the light around here. And I'm keeping that there because that is where the light would bounce off. It would bounce off the arm and off into space. So this actually adds to our glow effect, and that is the key to a truly effective OSL effect. The way you correctly apply OSL is not through wanton overspraying with an airbrush, but carefully thinking about where the light is actually going to hit and going off of those reflected surfaces to convey the transfer of light. Going quickly back to our example and our kind of diagram here. This is all consistent with a situation in which there is no object in the way. However, say we have something, an object that's right here. Maybe a gun, an arm, who knows? It could be any number of things, but that means we have to start applying our light in different areas. We're going to get photons that bounce off of this blue, and even a little bit back to there. We're going to get photons that bounce off the side a little bit here. So we're going to have to add some light sources to reflect that. The light is going to be the strongest where it can directly reach our object, and it's still going to exist here and then just kind of taper off a little bit. Likewise, off of this corner, we're going to get strongest light here and taper off as it becomes harder to get those angles of attack. And we might even get a little bit around the edge here, but a very controlled amount, because again, we're dealing with bounce light here. It's going to, with each bounce, some of the light source does get absorbed, so it'll be less strong each time it bounces. And that is why we keep this kind of reddish pink tinge over here. Over here, the spray works, but you can't spray this area without also hitting all of that, unless you have a very strong control of your airbrush. This is why I generally prefer to use straight up paintbrushes when designing OSL effects. Now, there is one creator who I have noticed takes very good care and control with his OSL. And that is a YouTuber who goes by Trovarian Miniatures, who I believe is actually a former Golden Demon winner and overall an excellent miniature painter. And I would definitely recommend checking out his videos if you want some amazing examples of well-executed OSL. Going back to our art project here, you can see on the left, there is a miniature painted by Eons of Battle, and on the right, one by Trovarian Miniatures. I'm not just trying to dunk on Eons of Battle here. He's a very good painter and a very talented hobbyist. However, we can see that this is a very similar situation. Two different eye lenses, each emitting light, and they're handled in two different ways. One is sprayed over with an airbrush, and the other is carefully and controlled applied via the brush. Now let's take a look at what our silhouettes are looking like here. For our Vanguard helmet, we have a situation that looks roughly like this. And for our Space Marine helmet, we have a situation that looks roughly like this. That's the general profile of these two helmets, with a light source coming from the inside. This is, again, a classic example of recessed lighting. So we would expect to see lights along the edges here, and we would expect to see lights along the edges here, which is illustrated in both of these examples. They handle that aspect of it well. However, what we notice in Trovarian's example here is that there's no lighting in this part. There's no lighting over here. We can see the light stops as this curved surface also stops. We're not seeing a little hover around effect with his lighting. It's very controlled, and it's going exactly where it needs to be. That isn't quite the case here, and it's subtle, but even if we just take this color and tune down the overspray a little bit, we're again boosting the contrast of that glow, and ultimately it's going to end up popping a little bit more. Now, these are, 5-second photo edits, so I'm not taking the most care in the world, but you can already start to see the effect that it has. It doesn't look less glowy because there's not a glow around it, because that's not actually the property in which glow is conveyed. As I said before, glow is conveyed via the saturation and brightness of the paint, as well as its kickback lights off of reflected surfaces. Now, in this example, there aren't actually very many reflected surfaces. You can really go off of, if you wanted to be really gung-ho about it, you can see this light here could theoretically be reflecting off the gun if it were a very strong light. So if we want to grab a little bit of the green and maybe hit the gun a little bit, we could potentially see that as a way to reflect this green light. If we wanted to enhance the strength of Trovarian's eye lenses, which I don't think he intended to do, but is something we could do, and apply it to the inside rim of his helmet here. And that just gives a little hint that these eye lenses are going to be reflecting a little bit of a stronger light versus what he has currently. But again, I do not believe that to be his intention. It is just a possible way of approaching it. Now, I know what you're saying. Toast. Isn't it faster to do it with an airbrush? And I gotta ask you to stop and think a little bit about what that entails. Unless you already have a dedicated space set up for your airbrush, in which case, congratulations, you win hobbying. You gotta get out your airbrush, set up your paints, thin your paints, do the airbrushing, clean out your airbrush, put it away, and pack it all up. That's not an insignificant amount of time. It might save you time if you're doing, for example, a 24-hour challenge in which you're painting like 2,000 points of miniatures. But if you're not a YouTuber looking for those sweet, sweet views, don't do that. You don't need to. And you can get a much better result with just a little bit steadier of a hand and a little bit more thought. So next time you reach for the airbrush thinking you're going to apply some OSL, maybe look for your brush instead. There's a couple of examples of OSL that I use in my models without even touching the airbrush, and I think they came out quite nicely. Of course, I'm not the greatest painter in the world, so there is a little bit of slop involved, but I think you can see that I am controlling where exactly the light is coming from, and I'm also controlling which reflected surfaces we're getting bounce light from, which is conveying that actual sense of emitting light rather than a general glow around the area, which is what the overspray technique basically affords you. So I do very much hope that was helpful to some of you exploring the wild and actually quite fun realm of designing lighting for your miniatures, and hopefully you'll try it out and have some fun of your own. Let me know how you like to approach OSL in the comments below. Did I make a major misstep? There are a lot of other types of OSL, which maybe I'll explore more in other videos. Things like the weapons on Dana Howell's model I didn't touch on because they should be approached a little bit differently. And there's also atmospheric OSL. What about light sources that are coming from outside of the model itself? That should be handled differently as well. Let me know if you want to see those kinds of videos. Don't forget to give me a like if you found this video helpful, and stay subscribed if you want some more color theory, kit bashes, and of course, just a little more bread. Peace!